Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where we talk about taking average buildings or apartments and converting them into amazing communities. So I am your host, John Brackett. Another great guest today. His name is Mike Simmons. Mike has a very unique background, very interesting background. So Mike is a real estate investor, podcaster, speaker who has shared the stage with Gary Vaynerchuk. So Mike, of course, I'm going to ask you some questions about that. And let's see, you have an Agent 2021 conference in 2018. Yep. So He's also the co-owner of the wholesaling company, Return on Investments, producer and host of the popular podcast, Just Start Real Estate, and a partner in a 7-figure flipping business. So one of the nation's largest real estate mastermind groups. Actually, 7-figure flipping is one of the nation's largest real estate mastermind groups. Okay, I actually thought that was a business and not a mastermind. So it's a mastermind. Yeah. So Mike currently owns about 16 rental properties. Okay. And he has sold via wholesale and flipped over 80 properties this year. Now, Mike most recently wrote a book titled Level Jumping. And that book talks about how he grew his business to over $1 million in profits in 12 months. And it tells the story of that journey. So Mike, we have a lot to talk about and a lot to digest, but welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. I'm excited.
Yeah, awesome, man. Hey, so let's start with Gary V, okay? I think Gary V has done a great job over the last probably 10 years, dialing in his video content game and his social media marketing game. Yep. And a tremendous marketer. I think maybe for those that don't know, he started off distributing wine, from in this case, a store that his father owned, and he scaled that thing pretty good and then ventured off and then done a couple things. So Tell us a little bit about your appearance there and what was the contribution that you made to the show or his show?
Totally. Yeah. So this will be a great lesson in you don't know until you ask kind of a thing.
Right.
So I reached out to Gary a couple of years ago. It's probably been about 2.5 years now. And I was trying to get him on my podcast. Like, it's a swing for the fences. I get it. He's a busy guy. It's only barely applicable to my podcast, but I just thought I'd love to get him on. He's been a big influence on me. So I reached out to him more than once, persistent. And, but not too long after I reached out to him, I got he didn't respond. But I got an email from VaynerMedia, and they said, hey, we're putting on this conference called Agent 2021. It's going to happen for 4 years in a row. It's going to be all kinds of agents, real estate agents and insurance agents and all kinds of different agents. And we want you to be a part of it and speak. And I was like, there's no way this happened other than the fact that I reached out to him. He probably looked me up, did a little minute of due diligence and said, all right, let's get this guy involved. Like, that's literally how it had to go. So I got to talk to him at the event, like, just for a second. Obviously, he's a busy guy. But it just goes to show, like, if you just reach out and ask, like, you don't have to necessarily just say, hey, the problem is people just say, hey, can you do this for me kind of a thing. I just said, I'd love to have you on my show. I want to make it easy as I can. You tell me the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes that you have available, and I'll be there. And although that didn't happen, something maybe even better happened. He invited me to this. It was at the Dolphins Stadium, the Miami Dolphins football stadium. Like, it was in Miami. It was this huge event. It was amazing. And I was on stage, like I said, share the stage with him. And I was talking about how social media is being used at the time. This was a couple years ago, but being used at the time to market, to find deals and things like that, and what that might look like going forward. So, yeah, it was awesome. It was an awesome experience. Cool to be invited. I mean, intimidating. There were some big names there and some different people, but it was a fun time. And like I said, it's really a study in like don't say you can't. Don't say they'll say no. Don't say it's not worth my time. Like, swing for the fences once in a while. And like they say, like, aim for the stars, and if you hit the moon, great. And that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I really like that. You said something that kind of caught my ear, and you said that you were a little intimidated by the folks there. Why would that be? Why were you intimidated?
Because while I've spoken on stage, and I've spoken on stage in front of a lot of people, being at the Miami Dolphins football stadium itself, being on the infield of that is overwhelming. You know what I mean? It's like being in a Coliseum. Like it's huge. And then just the whole Gary V and the star power. It's different than what I had been involved in before. But, I had a conversation earlier today with someone and it was someone who's like done some incredible things. And I said, do you ever get imposter syndrome, or do you ever feel like you're just in over your head? And what do you tell people who say, I feel like I'm in over my head. I feel like an imposter. I'm trying to be this thing, but I don't feel inside like I'm that. And this guy who is, it's the owner of Roofstock, if anybody knows who that is, but he said, that's the only way you grow. Like,
I was just about to say that.
You have to be in those situations unless you really love where you're at in life. And that's fine. And if you never want to do anything outside of what you're currently doing, great. But if you want more, if you have goals and you have things that you want to achieve, if you don't put yourself out of your comfort zone and do something where you feel a little bit like an imposter syndrome going on, or like you're over your head, it's not probably worth doing.
Yeah. What a great comment. And I love that. Right. I mean, really ultimately, and it's also a great segue for your book. And we're going to touch on that. But what an opportunity to be able to position yourself in an environment where you're now forced to grow, right? And I think, if we embrace that as entrepreneurs, as business people, we put ourselves in positions where we just create more sustainable opportunity for ourselves, right? Because you can't create that unless you are in a position to receive that. Really interesting. I was on a call the other day, and I don't remember the name of the gentleman who spoke these words. It'll come to me. But, he said, opportunity doesn't fall into your lap, right? You prepare for opportunity. It just doesn't happen, right? So the more we prepare for those opportunities, when it shows up, we're just able to take advantage of it or capitalize on it. Versus it just falling from the heavens, right? As I like to say. So awesome, man. I really love that. And what a great way to start the show, which is why I am super excited. So, hey, we're going to transition now. What a great transition into your book, right? Or to your book, which is called Level Jumping. And so, we just talked about the value of positioning ourselves in uncomfortable situations for growth. And truly that's the only way to grow. In fact, I'm reading a book right now, and I'll touch on that later on, but talk to us a little bit about your book, Mike, and just the premise, and just walk us through that.
Totally. And so for most people, I really struggled with the name. I thought of it. I liked it. I kind of workshopped it with some folks. So what do you think? Some people said, I love it. Some people said, what does it even mean? It doesn't mean anything to me. It's a term I've never heard. So I'm trying to coin this phrase. I'm trying to coin this term, level jumping. Everyone knows what it means to go to the next level. Okay. That's clear. But what I'm suggesting is it's possible to not go to the next level. It's possible to go to the next level, which is level jumping, right? I'm jumping over the next level. Right. And so for me in my business, I spent probably 5 or 6 years growing my business in my little bubble in Michigan, doing what I thought to be right, and with a couple of people that I had in my community that were kind of doing the same thing, and I had this view of what was possible. And it really wasn't, they always say you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with, or whatever that saying is. But I never really understood what it meant to put myself around people who were beyond me in business. Most of the people in my local community were about where I was. Some of them were behind me. Yeah. And so when I started, and I did this by joining a mastermind. The 7-figure flipping mastermind is what I joined. I was a member of it. I just joined because I'm like, hey, I need to understand how folks that are doing not 20 deals a year like I was doing, they're doing 30, 50, 100, 150. I was like, this blew my mind. My first reaction was baloney. They're not doing that. That's a lie. That's all just hype and baloney. They're not. Right. But I got to know some of the folks. I got to visit them. I got to see the inside of their business. I got to really become close with these guys. And I'll be darned if they weren't doing that kind of volume, and they were doing it with less effort than me. And I didn't understand how. So I had the opportunity to surround myself with one guy in particular, but a lot of people contributed. But there's one gentleman in particular who had the exact business that I wanted. And he was about 4 years ahead of me. In other words, 4 years earlier, he was doing a couple, 1 to 2 deals a month. Right. And he grew it to over 12, 15, and 20 deals a month. And I was like, how? I am running my butt off. Like I have no time left. Like there's no way I could do more than I'm doing. And he's like, you're right. And I said, what did you do? And he sort of laid out the process of what he did. And not only what he did right, but he also told me the mistakes he made along the way. So once very important. So once we established that, I said, well, if you did that in 4 years organically on your own, just figuring it out, why couldn't I compress that? Why shouldn't I be able to do that in a quarter of the time that you did it? If it took you this long. And he's like, you're right. You probably could. And so I learned a very powerful and important lesson. And it's something that still I talk about to this day. It's one of the most important messages that I got from all of this surrounding myself with the right people is you can use other people's hindsight as your foresight. Right?
That's a great,
imagine.
Man, say that again. That's a great quote. In fact, we're going to quote you on that. That's such a great quote. Say that, repeat that again.
So you can use other people's hindsight who came before you as your foresight. Imagine if you could look forward and make decisions with 20/20 hindsight. It's insane, right? But that's what I started doing. I started surrounding myself and picking the brains of folks that were just farther down the road than I was. And I was learning what they were doing right and wrong. And if you know what someone does right and wrong and you have the playbook, as long as you don't question it, and I'm not a big fan of people that I call yeah butters. In other words, they say to you, hey, I want to grow my business or I want to start real estate. How do I do it? And you say, well, this is what I would do. Boom, boom, boom. Here's the steps I would take to start. And they go, yeah, but in my market, it doesn't work. Or yeah, but, I kind of I didn't have parents that were entrepreneurs.
I laugh, man, because I've heard that so many times. Good.
Totally. We all have.
Yeah, butters. Yeah, butters. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, butters, man. So one of my superpowers is, and it's not that impressive, but I'll tell you, this is something people should strive to work on is I'm an executor. I don't question people. If I ask your opinion because I believe you have the credentials and the experience and you really know what you're talking about, and I ask your opinion, I will not make you convince me. I will do it. I will execute on it. And that's what I did. This guy I knew he knew what he was talking about. I saw his business. I understood what he was about. And I said, what did you do? And he told me, and I just did it. And that was all there was to it. And I saw similar results. Matter of fact, I saw better results because I didn't make the same mistakes he made. So I made mistakes, of course, but not the same ones. And I was able to take his 4-year plan or his 4-year track record and crunch it down into a year. And that's what the book's about, because I get that question all the time. Legitimately, I joined 7-Figure Flipping. We were in a room. It was just 20 entrepreneurs, high-level entrepreneurs, and there was a challenge put out to the group. And I'm like most entrepreneurs, I'm very competitive. I played sports as a kid. I'm competitive now. I grew up with all boys. Like I'm all about competition. And the challenge that was put out to this group of people that were all doing $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 revenue businesses, it was the first company to get to over $1 million in gross profits. We will send you to Hawaii. You and your family send you to Hawaii for free, all expensive. Just a fun little bet to see who could get there first. And I got there first because I wasn't going to lose, right? So I got in this room and I was able to do it in a year. And so I've talked about that. And every time I talk about it on stage or on podcast or wherever, people come up and go, how did you do it? How do you go from doing 1 or 2 deals a month to doing 10 to 15 a month? How do you do it? And so I've explained this over and over, and I finally said, I got to put it in a book. I got to put it somewhere where it's documented and I can just ship that out.
Okay, beautiful, man. So I'm gonna unpack some of that. Okay, I'm gonna unpack some of that because there's a lot there. So you talked about 3 things that really stood out. The first thing that caught my ear was you using the language of possibility. Okay. And that's really important, right? Using the language of possibility, because when we cannot see what's possible, when you can't see what's possible, you don't run in that direction, right? It's impossible to run somewhere, to move in a direction that you don't see is possible. So that was the first thing. The second thing, which I think is really big, and we just talked about this, which is why this is such a great segue into your book, is surrounding yourself with people or seeking people out who are much further ahead than you are. And here's the reality, man. I've done that for years, and it's not an easy thing to do. It's really not, right? Because busy people are just busy, and they're busy for a reason because they're producing, man. They're producing. But being intentional about seeking people out and then, aligning yourself with people, frankly, that are just much smarter than you and I, right? That's what really starts to create growth. Right. And so a buddy of mine many years ago, he coined this saying, and maybe he didn't, but I remember it from him. He his comment was, don't be king of the shitheads. Okay. Right. Is don't put yourself in a position where you're the smartest person in the room. Okay. And so he used that phrase. But man, I never forgot that. In fact, I laughed my butt off, but it was so true. And I had to look to myself to say, okay, at what point, to your point, do you level jump? Right. And ultimately, I think one of the quickest ways to do that or start doing that is people. So let me unpack the third thing you talked about. So you talked about getting there faster. The word that I use is collapsing time, right? We're really big on collapsing time inside of our companies because, and when I say company, meaning acquisition, property management, right? For us, those two go hand in hand. And of course, we also deploy capital in different projects when they make sense, debt and equity. But when I talk about collapsing time, it's really about finding. There usually are a couple of key things inside of every business. So you talked about your superpower, right? So you know what that superpower is. So it allows you to really spend your time and energy on the things that matter the absolute most. And usually there are a couple, but that is a superpower. That's my superpower, man. I'm really good at focusing on what matters most. I'll leave a bunch of crap out, focus on what matters most, and execute, right? And it took me a long time, though, to build that skill set, but collapsing time is a huge one, right? So I'm going to touch on that because I think there's a lot of golden nuggets inside of the conversation of collapsing time, right? So for your business, when you look back on the tremendous growth that you did, right? And also that inspired you to write this book, which I think is cool. Thanks for sharing. What was the driver, man, that if you had to name one thing, right? Just one thing, what was the most important thing that really allowed you to start collapsing time, getting there faster?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, there's more than one. There's probably three big ones, but the one that I always point to when I'm asked to give the one, because that's what everybody wants, the one, is what I had this circular sort of logic, this catch-22 logic, and I think a lot of people do, where they say, I physically can't do more in my business because of time, and I have to sleep at some point. So I need to hire people, but I can't hire someone until I have a bigger business, right? More revenue. Right. And so, but you can't have the bigger business until you hire somebody, but you can't hire somebody in a bigger business, right? It just like this snake that's eating itself. And I had that. It wasn't until I stepped outside of that thinking and said, no, I have to start building a team. Now there's a difference. My first thought was I have to hire people, but I learned through this mentor that I was talking about, building a team doesn't always mean hiring them W-2, like base salary. Like there's ways to build a team very creatively and strategically. So once I started building a team, and more importantly, I realized as an owner of a company, I am okay to good at everything that has to be done on the company. And there's every once in a while, there's something I'm great at, but a lot of it, I'm good enough, right? As an owner, you force yourself into roles that are not natural for you because you're starting out and you're new, you have to. But once I realized that specifically speaking, sales, I was not the best salesperson on the planet. I was adequate. I was passable, right? But these aren't the adjectives you used for someone that you want to bring into your sales team, right? Adequate and passable. So once I brought in a sales guy who was a real sales guy, good. Right? And once I brought in a guy who he was a salesperson through and through, and I gave him the same amount of leads and the same amount of appointments that I was typically used to handling, and let's just say on 5 appointments, I would get one contract. He went out there on 5 appointments, and he got 2 or 3. Consistently. I was like, What? Are you kidding me? Like, how much money did I leave on the table by not having this guy or a guy like him in my organization? So I learned that while I'll go out there and do sales, I hated it. I would have to psych myself up. I'd be in the driveway going, all right, we just got to get through this. Put a smile on your face, like be what you have to be. But there are people who thrive on it. They want to get in that house because they want to get that contract. They want to make that connection. They want to empathize. They want to do all those things. And when you get somebody like that, it's great. Now you take every aspect of your business and you plug in someone who loves and they're made for that. That's just what they're made to do. That's when your business can explode. Now there's other things that are factors, but that's probably the biggest factor, putting the right people in the right butts and the right seats on my bus. that made all the difference in the world.
Okay, cool, man. So that's a great share. And, it sounds like your very first hire, for most people, it's an administrator, right? It sounds like your very first hire was sales.
Yeah, my first significant hire that lasted any amount of time.
Okay, so talk a little bit about your team, right? Your core team. So when you decided to scale, right, when you saw that blueprint and you said, okay, this is possible, now I need to surround myself with the right people, which you did, to help me understand what's possible, but also to help me see how I can do this a little bit more efficiently, right? So you did those things. Now you come to a place where you're like, okay, I know what my superpower is, and it's definitely not sales. So I'm going to hire someone for that, right? So talk a little bit about what that core team looked like, that first nucleus that you put together to prepare yourself, for growth.
Will do. So for me in my business, we have someone who's handling marketing. So there's somebody that runs. So for me, we're mostly sales and marketing. That's the core of our business. But so we have someone handling marketing, and we do all forms of marketing that people are probably familiar with. Then I have a team that answers the phone. So it's fluctuated. The amount of people fluctuate, but I have someone who answers the phone. Then I have acquisitions, a team of acquisitions, right? They go out and get the contracts, talk to the homeowners. Then I have someone in my company, it's called disposition. So I do a lot of wholesaling. So that's someone who takes that purchase agreement and markets it out to our buyers, which are landlords, flippers, multifamily people. Right. And then we have a transaction coordinator who deals with the title company and all the details, paperwork, getting LLC documents, getting, whatever documents we need from buyers and sellers. And that's like herding cats. And that's a whole skill set that I don't have either. I'm not a detailed guy. I learned this over the years too. So you talked about that administrative person. That was like the next person that we hired because we needed someone who would cross T's and dot I's, and it wasn't me. So that's my base team: marketing, phones, acquisitions, dispositions, transaction management. And then I also consider my bookkeeper part of my team because I'll tell you what, I've had some bad things happen in my life. I've made some big mistakes. I've had some crazy things happen. I've never lost sleep until I was tax time and I didn't have my books in order and I didn't know what to do because I didn't keep good records, right? That's a scary thing to have to look down the barrel of in April. So I put a bookkeeper on my team, train them up on how to do real estate, what real estate means, and I consider them part of my team. They take other clients, but I consider them part of my team. Okay, awesome, man. So I want to make a distinction, right? Because I hear people use these words interchangeably. So wholesale. Now, when you use the word wholesale, are you talking about assigning purchase and sale agreements, or are you a broker or an agent and you're going out there and you're capturing listing agreements, okay, and then turning around and then selling that for a fee plus, of course, a commission? No, the former. We're assigning purchase agreements. Okay. Sometimes we take them down ourselves and flip them ourselves. Sometimes I turn them into rentals. Whatever makes the most sense. But yeah, we're basically taking contracts and we're flipping contracts. Okay, awesome. So no, you said that you didn't like sales, but I can tell you're a marketer, right? And there's a distinction. So as soon as you said, "Hey, man, we spend most of our time on sales and marketing," I was like, okay, awesome. So now the show is going to get even better because I'm dealing with someone who understands how to market. So let's talk a little bit about marketing. Okay. So, as a wholesaler, someone doing 80 plus properties a year, obviously sales marketing, really, really important, but marketing probably very crucial because that's what keeps the leads coming in, right? That's what keeps the leads coming in. So break down what you do, like your marketing strategy, right? The top four sources for you, what do they look like, starting from 1 to 4? Will do. And it's just to underscore your point. I always tell people, and I firmly believe this, leads are to your business as oxygen is to your body, right? Breathe. You can't survive without leads very long, right? Hold your breath. And that's about how long your business can last without leads. So for me, it's an interesting question because if you ask me where the highest ROI is in my marketing approach, and you ask me where I'm getting the most deals, it's two different answers, right? Right. So the workhorse for me in the last 5 years, which is really where my business has hockey sticked, kind of a Midwest term. You might know that, right? Hockey stick, like goes up. So the workhorse has been direct mail, right? Believe it or not, direct mail works. The generation that sort of has the equity that we're looking for and has the life situations going on that makes it conducive to selling to us, they tend to be older. So if I look back at all the deals I've done in the last 5 years, I would say 85% of them have been over the age of 50 for sure, right? So we mailed to that. So direct mail still works in that demographic. People ask me all the time, who would sell their house based off of a postcard or a letter that you send? And I say a ton of people, at least 80 people last year, right? So that works. Second, now that's the most volume. We do the most volume with direct mail. The highest ROI marketing that we do is pay-per-click. PPC, right? Google AdWords. So in our market, and it's different every market, but for people who don't know, pay-per-click is essentially it's an auction system. You're bidding on keywords that people type into their computer, like sell my home fast, right? So in our market, it's a bidding process. So unlike direct mail where you can say, okay, I sent out 10,000 letters, I got one deal. If I send out 20,000, I'll get two, whatever the math is in your area. PPC doesn't work that way. PPC is an auction, right? I can have $100,000 a month that I will allot to it, but it doesn't mean I'll spend it. It just means it's available to me if I need to, depending on how competitive your market is. So in my market, my budget is $12,000 for PPC. I routinely spend.
Is that a year or a month?
A month.
Got it.
I routinely spend $10,000, right? And that puts me as a number one or number two return when someone types in the keywords that I'm bidding on. So I'm always at the top, one or two, and it costs me about $10,000 a month to do that. But that's where I make the highest ROI because direct mail, and I'll get to the other two in a minute, but direct mail, this is the analogy I use. It's kind of crude, but the analogy I use is direct mail is me going up to a girl at a bar and saying, I'd like to dance. PPC is that same girl coming up to me at the bar and saying, I'd like to dance, right? One of them is a sure thing dance. The other one, you might get rejected. So one of them is a solicitation. PPC are people typing in their computers, I want to sell my house. How do I get out of this thing?
Oh, man,
and it comes to you and it's like,
that's really good. Yeah.
You call those folks, you don't have to convince them to sell their house. They're trying to convince you to come buy it. So those are great leads.
So very high level of motivation with PPC.
They're motivated, man. They're looking for you. So that's a good thing. Yeah. So for us, the other two that are working the best for us over the last few years are text messaging, text blasting. And I think that's really been very effective for us since COVID hit because everyone's at home. They're in front of their computer. They're in front of their phone, whatever. So text messaging has worked well for us. And we also do a lot of ringless voicemail, which is, for those of you who don't know, you send out these blasts and it bypasses the ring on the phone. So it doesn't ring and give them some crazy automated message that no one listens to. It bypasses it. It goes straight to voicemail. They get a notification. There's a voicemail that came through. Who doesn't check a voicemail when they never heard their phone ring? Everyone does, right? It's human nature. It's curiosity. So then you put a voicemail on that. It's like, hey, sorry, I missed you. Just want to give you a call, whatever it is, whether your message is. But those are the four things that we're using with consistency.
Awesome, man. So here's the big question is what system do you use to distribute all of that? Right. So for example, Active Campaign.
Yep.
There's some products out there right now that can do most of what you described.
Yep.
What do you leverage?
Yeah. So there is a software. It's a software I never heard of it. We just started using it recently that handles our ringless and our text blasting. It's called Sendii, Sendii. So Sendii is what we use, but there's other ones out there that you can use for sure. But that's the one that we use. I know Sly Broadcast is what I used to use for ringless voicemail, Sly Broadcast. And then we used to use Callfire for texting, but we went under this one platform. For PPC, we do it in-house, man. We have a marketing guy that does our PPC for us. He handles all that Google AdWords stuff. It's a little bit of a science, and I don't suggest you try to do it if you have no clue what you're doing. You'll probably waste money and time. But we have someone in-house that handles that for us. And then direct mail. I design most of the direct mail still, but we use a company in Florida. It's called Evergreen Printing. They do the printing and the mailing. And, I spend around 34 cents a card, and I ship out, depending on how many I ship, but I usually ship in the neighborhood of 50 to 60,000. So a month.
Nice. That's a lot of cards, man. 50 to 60,000 a month. That is a lot of cards. And now are you focused predominantly in the Michigan marketplace in your backyard, hometown?
Yeah. So in my area of Michigan, it's called the Tri-County area. There's 3 counties that are very big, very popular, very, populated. So I go to all 3 of those counties, and it's like 3 million people population. It's pretty big.
Right. Awesome, man. I really love that. I love the conversation. Big distinction between marketing and sales, but you need to be a marketer to generate leads to actually have sales, right?
Yep.
And it took some time.
But you know what? Listen, when you do marketing, however that marketing is supposed to elicit a response, whether it be the phones or whatever it is, it's a real big miss on a lot of people's part. They get all excited about the marketing and they start generating leads, but they don't have anybody answering the phone, or they don't have anyone taking care of that lead when it comes in.
Right.
Think of it like a baby being put on the porch. How long do you leave that baby out there before you're like abusing someone? You know what I mean? So that lead is a baby. You better get out there and hold it, cuddle it, coddle it, sing to it, do whatever you have to do, because it's a valuable little life that it's in your hands. So Don't put out marketing if you're not ready to receive the responses that you're trying to get.
Okay, awesome, man. So I'm going to shift to finance, right? We're getting close towards the end of our show. Okay. So you talked about acquisition, right? Really the acquisition side of your business, how you market, how you use those leads to convert them into sales. Yep. Now, how about financing? When you're financing, well, in this case, you're assigning contracts. So you're not really
we do raise money too, so I can talk about it if you'd like. So
let's talk about that. Let's talk about the financing aspect of it and bringing capital to your deals. What does that look like, and what has worked really well for you?
I'll tell you what, I did something really smart when I started off 10 years ago. Had a friend locally. This was when Facebook business pages, they called them back then, were kind of a newer thing. And he's like, listen, when you start flipping houses, I know you're just starting, you're getting your feet wet, whatever. He said, whatever you do, document everything you're doing. Document before and after, take video, talk about what you want to do, talk about your business, talk about the business you want to have, like document. And we started doing that early on. And by doing that, I started attracting people who have money and said, hey, I saw you online, saw you on Facebook. I'm really interested. It's kind of interesting what you're doing. Kind of cool. You seem like a nice guy. I relate to you. At the time, me and my wife were partners in the business. And they said, we really want to talk to you about investing and getting involved in this. How do we fund your next flip? And so early on, I realized the power, and nowadays we'll use today's terms, of social media in building a network of private investors. So I'm one of the lucky few. I've never had to use hard money. I've never had to borrow from the bank. I take that back. I borrowed from the bank once on my first deal I did. I had to borrow the money from the bank on a standard mortgage, went all in on the renovation. But since then, all of my deals have been through private money, all of them. So I've got private lenders that lend at great rates. They're very quick. There's very little hassles or hurdles that I have to go over. And honestly, here's a good, we'll tie this back to the very beginning of the conversation. One of my private lenders, I was at the Gary Vee conference in Miami, Agent 2021. I was on the infield of the Miami Dolphins stadium. And I got a text from my acquisitions guy. And he's like, hey, I got the opportunity to get this house. Here's the thing. We got to close on it tomorrow. We've got to move. And I'm the person in my company. And I'm a firm believer on the owner of the company should be the person who's cultivating the relationships with investors. I think that's something that is on the owner to keep that in their court. And they said, we need to close on it tomorrow. We need funds now. And I was like, I am in the infield. I can't write up the paperwork. I can't do it. And I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to do this. So I called one of my lenders. I said, listen, I am in Miami right now. I cannot get anything notarized. I can't make the mortgage document. I can't write out the promissory note. I need you to wire, and we're in Michigan, so everyone's going to laugh at the small amount, but I need you to wire $120,000 to my bank account, my business bank account. I can't give you any paperwork. I just need you to wire it so I can close on this tomorrow. And he said, done. I'll have the wire there in 2 hours. And I was like, that's the power of private money. That's the power of relationships. And that's the power of treating people right, having a track record of doing the right thing. That's what happens, right? So when people go, I can't close tomorrow. I got to call my private lender. I got to go to the bank. They want to have all this information. Nope. I got a guy who I've treated right for years, and he has a lot of money. And I called him and said, wire the money, please. I don't have paperwork. I'll get it to you as soon as I get home. And he said, done.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, man. And what I tell people is, it's really interesting. I get into these conversations around financing a lot, right? And it's a great thing when, most of the dialogue to get something financed is back and forth with email agreements.
Yeah.
But what I was trying to tell my buddy is, man, you have to realize that took 10 years to cultivate, right? With all these different people. Yeah. And it doesn't just happen overnight. In fact, I'll tell you a really quick story. Just closed on a property 4 weeks ago, did something very similar to you. Okay, very similar. And that was in another state. But I probably have done maybe 20, 30 transactions with that person, right? So they know me really, really well. And then another one, thankfully, this was an apartment building, fairly good sized apartment building, trying to use a local lender there. It was a bank. And man, it was just taking forever. I just couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
And so we were coming up against our close period, right? The close of escrow. And I had 2 weeks left. And I said, there was no way these guys haven't even ordered an appraisal. They wanted a phase 1 environmental report. And I go, there's no way. There's no way. And I just, at that point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm for sure getting strung along, right? So picked up the phone, called someone up in San Diego that I've done quite a bit of business with. And I said, look, here's the situation. I don't even have legal documents for the LLC that we're going to set up. And they end up closing in a week, man, with no docs except for a note and deed of trust, right? So that was power relationships. But that deal, very profitable deal, something that we have. In fact, I'm refinancing that this month as we speak. But I just love the analogy that you used, right? Because it is so true. But I think one of the points that you were stressing there was that those relationships, they happen over time from performance, right?
Yep.
It's a function of performance. Yep. There's no way that investor or that person would have done that if they didn't have a track record of performance with you. And I think more importantly, just knowing your character, right? Because I think those two things go hand in hand. So I'm gonna shift, Mike, because we're getting ready to wind this down. I love the story, love the example, tremendous example. Before we wrap things up, what is the one question that you have for me that you think could add some value to our audience? And then, we're going to start wrapping this thing up.
The question I have for you?
Yes, if any.
Well, boy, this is the first time. Never had anybody ask me to ask the host a question. All right. Well, let me ask you this then. Okay, this might have value. What would you tell yourself when you got started? If you could go back and give yourself advice, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give yourself? Great question. How long back? When you started real estate. When I started real estate, that's a great question, man. What would be what would I tell myself? I think maybe not so much tell myself, but what I would do differently. The one thing that I would do differently, when I started back then was, I think it would just be, for me, it would be aligning myself with partners that are doing just larger transactions, right? And the reason why I say that is when I started, I come from a commercial banking background. So when I started, there were a lot of deals that I could do, residential, commercial, but, in 2008, 2009, there was just a lot of opportunity out there. And I did not build those relationships quick enough because I just wasn't smart enough to do that, right? I didn't have the experience. I didn't understand why it was important, why it was so important to build, I call them venture relationships, right? Or deal relationships. Yeah. And ultimately it came down to partnering or working with people that were just much better at me in very specific things. It could be ground up construction, great example, right? Another one was maybe a specific product type, whether it be multifamily or office buildings or industrial buildings for that matter. I didn't have those relationships in place. So, irrespective of all the different opportunities I ran into, I really gave up so much opportunity because I was too narrowly focused on just what I did, which paid huge dividends for me because of the narrow focus. The challenge was, I just left too much on the table and probably could have scaled much bigger, much faster by, having those relationships. So guess what happened in March? When March hit, okay, I already knew the answer to the very question that you asked. That was the very first thing I started doing. I started
getting on the phone with all my lenders, agency lenders, all my local lenders, all my contacts, right? Literally, I did that for 2 months straight, every day for 2 months straight. Okay. And on top of that, building additional relationships with agencies, right? Because at the time, what was happening was these guys, they were setting the market. They were the only ones lending money out.
Yeah.
The other side of that was with venture partners. Okay. I'm very adamant about that now. So I knew what to do, right? So now, of course, the folks that are really good at development, right? Large projects, 100 units, 200 units. So we started those conversations already in March. Okay. Cause I knew some of I'd seen this pattern before, right? You're going to have a lot of busted up stuff, and there's going to be opportunities to partner with people that are tremendous at construction, have great track records, and just can get into deals that I could not, right?
Yeah.
That was another, let's see, office building. The office building space was another, and then hospitality. Okay, and of course, multifamily, right? But I spent 2 months, man, doing that, literally every day, reaching out to people like that from that very lesson. So hopefully that helps. And man, what a great question. What a great question. What a great question. And of course, to folks that want to invest as well, right? I mean, I think that's kind of the given. We all do that, to your point, having these conversations and, making sure that people understand what you do and how you do it. But that was the lesson learned. And that was the very first thing that I jumped on this time around.
Nice.
So great question, man. Mike, how do people get in touch with you? I know, we're going to have a lot of folks out there that are going to be fascinated by your book, Level Jumping, and I love the title. How do they get in touch with you? How do they get in touch with you? How do they get the book, first of all? And what would be the best way that they reach out and connect with you?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So you can go to Amazon and get the book. Just look up Level Jumping, or you can type in Mike Simmons Level Jumping. But if you want, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but if people are interested in getting a free digital download of it, if they want it for free and they want to get a digital version of it, they can do that. If they text the two words, just start. So JUSTSTART, just start, 2 words, to the number 55444. So it's 55444. Text 2 words, just start, and I'll send you a free digital download of the book so you can check it out. If you want a hard copy, go to Amazon. You can get a hard copy there for sure. They can always reach out to me at mike@juststartrealestate.com. That's my podcast email address. And then one last thing is I only have one event that I speak at every year. It's a big event, but I'm pretty selective with where I speak. And it's called Flip Hacking Live. It's typically in San Diego. It's typically in person, but for this year, it's going to be virtual for obvious reasons. So it is on October 15th, 16th, and 17th. If you want more information about it or want to see where I'm speaking, a lot of speakers just like me they're going to blow your mind with the content. It's just giving. It's just content. But you can go to bestrealestateevent.com and check it out and get a ticket if you want it. So check it out there at bestrealestateevent.com.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much for sharing. You've been a great guest, great information. I really appreciate, some of just the key points. I'm going to summarize really quickly. I think, some of the key things that you spoke about that I really absolutely love is, number one, you talked about possibility, right? The importance of being able to recognize what's possible. And when possibility is clear, when we have clarity around possibility, at that point, now we have something to pursue, right? So, man, I really appreciate you sharing that. You're one of the few that I think has really touched on that as clearly as you did. The other thing is people matter, right? But not just about people, but making sure that we are aligning ourselves with people that, frankly, are just much smarter than we are, right? Yeah. And I know for a lot of people that might be very uncomfortable to say, but I think the more we can embrace being uncomfortable, okay, being comfortable, being uncomfortable, the greater the opportunity for growth. And then, lastly, you touched on collapsing time. And the biggest takeaway there that you highlighted was marketing and sales. So, which made total sense for me. Now I understand why you hired a salesperson first, because you're a great marketer, right? So, man, I want to thank you. You've been a tremendous guest. Thanks also for sharing your book, for also talking to our audience about being on this virtual summit that you're putting together. I think it's going to be great. Don't forget, the promise that you made to me, I get in for free.
You got it.
Just kidding, man. All right. But you've been tremendous. I really appreciate you. Mike, thanks so much. I wish you continued success, and I look forward to having you back on, when, you're at, let's see, what would it be at 10 figures or 12 figures?
Whatever, 12 figures. I'll come back on for sure, man. No doubt about it.
I love it. Thanks, bud. Appreciate your time very much.
All right. Thanks, John.
Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.